Hey, this is RJ May, and you're watching Mr. Mario 2011.
Hey, so what is going on, everyone? It is me, Mr. Mar, and I want to make this video because this is a thing that I see a lot of people doing. It could be either small YouTubers, big YouTubers, and this has mostly been happening with the newer capture cards coming out. For example, the Elgato Game Capture HD60. This capture card is the first good capture card that can record at 1080p and 60 frames a second. You know, PC, it can do that already, but consoles couldn't really do that as often. I swear, I'm not plugging them or anything like that. I mean, technically I am, but I'm trying to say I'm not sponsored by them. They're not paying me to do any of that. It's just the capture card I use. It's my preference. That's what it is. But anyways, with that, and especially with the 60 frames a second rollout on YouTube, a lot of people now are uploading footage in 60 frames a second, and they are able to, show all their subscribers, all their viewers, their games, their footage, whatever they're recording, in 60 frames a second. However, one thing I'm seeing people do is they just excitedly hook up their capture card and start recording in 60 frames a second, and a lot of games on these new consoles, the PS4 and the Xbox One, are locked at 30 frames a second. So my thing here is, what happens when you record a 30 frames a second game at 60 frames a second? Now, what you're looking at on screen is some footage from Sunset Overdrive. This game is on the Xbox One. I'm recording this in 60 frames a second. This game runs locked at 30 frames a second. So there's another 30 frames per second being used that is not there. And essentially what happens is, when you're recording, either two things could happen, and it depends on the footage. Either one, and this has happened when I use some camera footage, like I recorded some footage from my camera, I think, no, I was actually doing kind of the opposite. I ended up rendering 30 frames a second footage at 60. It was recorded in 30, and then I rendered it at 60, and then it just looked like it was halved, almost. But either that could happen, your game will just look slower, or there won't be a difference, really. The main difference is going to be you're going to be spending more of your time, recording all this stuff because there's going to be higher system resources required. You're going to be using more of your system resources. You're going to be using more of your storage. You're going to spend more time uploading this. It's going to take more time for YouTube to process. And even for end users, depending on the browser you use, Firefox, from what I know, still does not handle 30 frames per second properly, if at all. So depending on the browser, and even depending on someone's internet connection and the computer they have, if they have a slow internet connection or just a older computer, they might not be able to watch the video properly if it's in 60 frames a second. So if you're watching this, look down at the quality. This is if you're watching this on the YouTube homepage, or the YouTube watch page, I guess. Look at the quality, and you might be watching it in either 720p 60 or 1080p 60. And the game looks fine. I'm sure it does. Now, go ahead and bring that down to 480p. Once you bring down the resolution, you're going to notice that aside from it being blockier and more pixelated and lower quality, there's really no difference to that. So really the only times you're going to suffer is, as I said, if you take a 30 frames per second video and you render that out at 60 frames, and then YouTube does its own crazy thing on its own end. But if you're doing this, there's really no point in recording a 30 frames per second game at 60 frames per second. I mean, you're seeing it right here. There's really no difference, and if there is a difference, I mean, it's not a good difference. It looks worse when you show this at 30 frames per second, but I did it with some test footage already. I tried it out, and from what I saw, no, there was no difference. Like, the game looks like it runs at 30 frames per second when you watch it in 60 frames, and even when you watch it in 30 frames, the game looks like it's running in 30 frames per second. Essentially, you're just padding your video with another 30 frames per second that doesn't exist. That's just extra data that's not needed, that doesn't exist. Nothing is needed. It's not boosting the frame rate on your video, how it looks or anything like that. It's not making it look better. Nothing like that is going on. You're just wasting extra resources. You're wasting extra time. You're wasting extra storage. That's all you're doing. So this is a question that some people have had, and I've answered it. And this is also just, for people who do render their games and, record their games and all that at 60 frames a second when they're being played at 30. There's really no need to do that. I promise you, you're not benefiting from it at all. Unless you, somehow, I don't know, speed up the footage that you have by double and, try and fake the 60 frames per second thing. Anyways, this is Mr. Mario signing off. Thank you for watching, everyone.